Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I am trying to get us in the mood for Halloween. Oh wait, I've forgotten part of my outfit. Got these gloves they're okay, you know. I don't know, it might have looked better without the gloves. Hi! I'm some kind of bunny, some kind of evil bunny, I think. Bunny at a funeral, maybe? I don't know. I feel that maybe someone knows what this is. This is like a character, I don't know. Anyway, since it's Halloween, I wanted to maybe do some topics that are getting a little spooky. It's kind of fun. Nothing too crazy though. Today, I'm excited to do a topic that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is sleep paralysis. I've got an article I'm going to read to you. But don't worry, it's not too scary. It's more just interesting, you know? And before we get started, I just want to let you know that I have a website. So if you enjoy this video, you might want to check that out too. It's a monthly subscription. I do ASMR videos over there. Just kind of different than what I do on here. We can get to know each other a bit more. I do custom ASMR requests. So yeah, check it out if you want to, if you like this. Anyway, let's get into this article. We can learn about sleep paralysis. Yeah, I've had my own experience with sleep paralysis just once. I think it was sleep paralysis. It could have just been a bad dream, but it's the only time I've ever experienced it. And I just remember being terrified when I came to. Pretty sure I had to sleep with the light on, which I usually don't have to do since I was a child. So yeah, I feel very much for you if you do experience this regularly. Anyway, this article I have for you is called "When Science Meets the Supernatural: Brains, Dreams, and the Boundaries of Reality." It's written by Matt Carden, middle of last year. I like that because that means it's nice and recent. So he says, "Dear Living Dark reader," that's the website, Living Dark, "having suffered from traumatizing visionary sleep paralysis attacks for years in my 20s, and having delved deeply into the literature about this phenomenon, I'm nonplussed whenever I read things like the following, which comes from a recent article in the Wall Street Journal titled, 'If Not Demons, What Causes Sleep Paralysis?' Note, this article is behind a paywall. We know the temporoparietal junction. What is that? I think that just is a part of the brain. We know the temporoparietal junction uses touch and feedback so that your brain can figure out where your body is, where it ends, and where another's body begins. Oh, that's interesting. I never really thought about that before. It's likely that the shadow figure that is a central aspect of sleep paralysis is the result of some sort of electrical disturbance in this part of the brain, creating a creepy or malevolent other at the blurry edge of our imagined body. hallucinations are the last part of sleep paralysis and the hardest to explain. The goblins or devils or aliens we see when we are trapped in this space between sleep and waking. Unsurprisingly, the scientific basis of these visions remains elusive and challenging to investigate. If I had to venture a hypothesis, it would include some sort of mismatch between the neurotransmitter serotonin and other arousal neurotransmitters that come online as we wake up. These hallucinations are similar to intense psychedelic experiences, which rely on serotonin modulation. Note the implied, overt, materialist, reductionist attitude, the assumption that the shadow figure often encountered in sleep paralysis and all the other perceptions represent nothing but brain states. What, pray tell, is the warrant for this? The very act of recognizing it as an assumption is the first step towards recognizing the philosophical hatchet job that is being carried out in such reasoning. Then there's this. Of course, sleep paralysis is not purely a physical phenomenon. Just as the dreaming brain often stitches together a story in search of cohesion, our waking brains seek to give meaning to the strange and terrible sensations experienced during sleep paralysis. Culture and beliefs play a role. If you grow up in a society where folklore blames evil witches, demons, or other malevolent forces for sleep paralysis, your experience of it will be different, and perhaps worse, than someone who grows up in a place without these myths. Yeah, the idea that it's a demon is just terrifying, right? It just is. Who could live with that knowledge if you experience this stuff? I think I would want to tell myself, no, it's just my brain. It's just brain doing crazy things, but I know how I like to think about things. The idea that sleep paralysis, both the experience itself and its basic characteristics, is generated by cultural beliefs, what has elsewhere been called the cultural source hypothesis, was roundly disproved as a catch-all, comprehensive explanation right from the start of modern SP studies, when folklorist David Hufford has recounted in his groundbreaking 1982 book, The Terror That Comes in the Night, an experience-centered study of supernatural assault traditions, found that people in Newfoundland who hadn't even heard of that country's traditional lore about the old hag who shows up and paralyzes you in your sleep still had the same experience. Additional research has confirmed this multiple times over the years. Among people who, on the one hand, are immersed in varying cultural traditions of nocturnal supernatural assault that specify the types of supposed spirit entities that cause it, and among people who, on the other hand, have little or no notion of such things, the same experience occurs with pretty much the same frequency and, striking of all, pretty much the same structural characteristics, including waking up or coming to partial consciousness in a state of general physical paralysis, feeling an oppressive weight on the chest or body. That's what I felt. I have explained it before, so I won't take too much time talking about it, but I woke up in my bed and I felt this pressure on my chest, and I felt that I knew who was doing it. Like, I felt it was a ghost in the house that I was sleeping in, because someone had told me either that day or the day before that there was this old housekeeper who haunted the place, and his name was Thomas. And so, as I felt this pressure on my chest, I was saying, please stop, Thomas, like, please stop. You know, it's like I knew that it was him doing it. So it was just very weird. And then I came to, and I was still laying in the same position in my room. And yeah, it was creepy, y'all. And but the creepiest part of it is that I was telling a girl who was also staying at this house. Maybe a few weeks later, she had just arrived, and I was telling her of my experience, and she was like, no way, that happened to me last night. So yeah, what was that all about? Anyway, I went off on a tangent. So yes, feeling an oppressive weight on the chest or body, being gripped by extreme terror, seeing a monstrous entity or entities nearby that seem to be the source of the paralysis. That's terrifying. Sometimes hearing strange sounds like hissing or voices, and a few other items. So in light of this, why the ongoing recourse by various people to the rhetoric of the cultural source hypothesis? So in light of this, why the ongoing recourse by various people to the rhetoric of the cultural source hypothesis, even in its somewhat soft form like the line from the Wall Street Journal article? Part of me wants to speculate that this tendency represents an attempt to write out of reality an experience that otherwise blows open the conceptual, and more than that, the experiential door to more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in your philosophy. As readers of my work over the years are well aware, I have thought about these matters in relation to the general subject of sleep paralysis, and to my own experiences of it, at length and in depth. I can click that my own experience of it is a link. Maybe we'll click that, because I'm actually curious what his experiences are. SP is, let's face it, one of the most intimate experiences you can have, since it blurs the boundary between the sleeping and waking minds, and thus floods us with an overwhelming experience within the theatre of our subjectivity. It may also destabilize our former sense of and or notions about reality. Yeah. From 1781. The Wall Street Journal piece is adapted from the new book, This Is Why You Dream, What Your Sleeping Brain Reveals About Your Waking Life, by neuroscientist Rahul Jandial. At one point in the book, Jandial, after delving quite ably into various speculations about the nature of dreams and nightmares, as in his observation that some cultures don't even have a term for nightmares, and instead consider them windows to the edges of consciousness, flatly asserts, the truth is that nightmares, like dreaming, are the product of neurobiology. It's one thing to note the self-evident and not unimportant fact that all experiences and states of consciousness have neurological correlates. It's another to make the blithe leap to asserting that a given experience, especially something as rich and subjectively central as dreaming, is the product of neurobiology. Such a claim is not a scientific assertion, but a philosophical one. And yet this clear instantiation of neuromania, as the philosopher and neuroscientist Raymond Tallis, among others, astutely started calling the drive toward all-pervasive brain-oriented explanations over a decade ago, is still widely preferred and broadly accepted. I, for one, don't accept it on the simple grounds that it doesn't answer questions, but instead gives the appearance of answering them while really begging them. It writes them and the larger possibilities to which they refer clean out of its map of reality, and then it assumes that only what it can see from within the boundaries of such an abridged and truncated representation of a world, I'm half tempted to say a philosophically and ontologically sanitized world, is real. How much more broad-minded and compelling is a position like that of the medical anthropologist and integrative health professor Shelley Adler, author of the 2011 book Sleep Paralysis, Nightmares, Nocebos, and the Mind-Body Connection. She considers the subject of sleep paralysis both broadly as a trans-historical and trans-cultural phenomenon, and specifically by detailing the field research that she personally carried out in the 1970s among the geographically distributed United States community of Hmong immigrants, where a phenomenon that came to be called sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome had begun to proliferate. I don't think I've heard of that before. The newspaper accounts of this crisis, by the by, inspired filmmaker Wes Craven to create A Nightmare on Elm Street with its iconic villain Freddy Krueger, who kills people in their dreams. Interesting. Adler is careful to lay out her philosophical and methodological position in a way that indicates it is richly open to multiple perspectives. And then he's quoting her. Whoops. This thing wants to keep falling forward, but I just have to remember if I ever want to wear it out somewhere. Maybe clip it in my hair somehow. It has only been during the last 2 decades that the nightmare has begun to re-emerge as a significant figure in American culture. One that can also be recognized by biomedicine when the entity is conceptualized as sleep paralysis with hypnic hallucinations. The nightmare's role has been viewed as significant in terms of religion and spirituality for thousands of years. At the beginning of the 21st century, knowledge of the science of sleep paralysis coexists with spiritual explanations, often in the same individual. Given that natural and supernatural understandings of the nightmare have endured for millennia, this is not surprising. Neurophysiological findings regarding sleep paralysis simply do not supplant spiritual interpretations. Scientific developments do not preempt supernatural understandings of sleep paralysis. Often, scientific information is incorporated into the interpretation by the individual experiencer, hence the explanation that alien abductors use sleep paralysis to restrain their victims. Near-death and out-of-body experiences also do not lose their spiritual significance when their neurological characteristics are explained. For many nightmare sufferers, science and spirituality are simply not mutually exclusive. By considering the stable set of core nightmare phenomena across religious and scientific traditions, different understandings of these experiences can be explored. Adler also goes on to note that nightmare accounts challenge many of our categories of thought and conceptualization of the world, and that the intrinsic fusion of biology with culture and psychology in the nightmare or sleep paralysis experience produces a highly interpretable event that cannot be categorized using conventional mechanistic models. It defies traditional categories and the division of academic disciplines, because the nightmare does not respect the boundaries we have set between science and religion, or body and mind. Our thinking must also defy conventional reductionist models in order to understand the experience as fully as possible. For me, these considerations point to a larger concern with the importance of being honest with ourselves, honest about our experiences, all of them, not just dreams and sleep paralysis, and the widely, in fact almost universally ignored set of assumptions and presuppositions that constitute our Peterburgerian sacred canopy of meaning, the interpretive grid that we erect as a figurative sky to cover and reduce the teeming threat of the world and make it comprehensible. This act of cosmic reduction, while understandable in its motivation, actually sets us up for a great deal of trouble and trauma. For when envoys from that wider realm outside our cosmic canopy arrive, as they eventually inevitably do, and punch through its fabric to enter our world as intrinsic anomalies that exude an aura of mystery and menace because of their sheer unnameability, we are faced with a genuine experience of cosmic horror, like the one that I encountered 30 years ago when I woke up to something more awful than I had ever suspected or imagined. I've got to try to find that article. Yes, on the other side of that horror is reality, even enlightenment, even the peace that passes understanding. But it is we who determine whether we first have to encounter it as a horror through which we must pass before we can rediscover our reason for being and our rootedness in fact, our inseparable, indivisible identity with the ultimate. Let me see if I can find this. Oh no. Okay, I don't know if this is the article, but that one didn't work, unfortunately, that link. We'll just read this. When the first of many sleep paralysis attacks happened to me in the early 90s, I had no idea that it was the onset of a period that I would later come to regard as a spontaneous, shamanic type initiation via nightmare. I didn't know it would shatter the psychological, spiritual, ontological, metaphysical, and interpersonal assumptions that had undergirded my worldview and daily experience for so long that I had forgotten they were assumptions instead of givens. Terence McKenna, among others, has argued that in accordance with the same principle that keeps a fish oblivious to the existence of water, the perturbation of consciousness is necessary for us to even become aware of the reality of consciousness as such. For me, this was confirmed with lasting impact by the experience of waking up one night from a profoundly deep sleep to encounter a darkly luminous, vaguely man-shaped outline of a being that stood over me at the foot of the bed, and that shone with sizzling rays of shadow, and that represented a thunderous and sweet, don't know how to say that word, generous, intended solely for me, black hole of a negative singularity, a presence whose entire reason for being was to draw me in and annihilate me. In the manner of dreams and demons, the experience was as much cognitive and emotional as it was perceptual. There was no separation between these usually discrete categories, nor was there a separation between the categories of self and other, between me and the assaulting presence. Horror was literally all there was, all that existed, all that was real, not as a reaction to the experience, but as an organic and inevitable symmetry of being. I was not horrified. The experience was purely and simply horror. When this proved to be not an isolated episode, but an ongoing crisis spanning a period of months and years, and when the psychic effects began to leak into the daylight world and contaminate my daily life with a distinct and inescapable background static of creeping nightmarishness, I knew something dire had happened. I had crossed some sort of threshold, and the most likely vocabulary for thinking and talking about it was the vocabulary of cosmic horror, which I had learned from years of obsessively reading Lovecraft criticism, and a whole host of associated authors. So this article is quite long as well, so I won't read the whole thing. I just wanted to know more about his experience. Yeah. So what do you guys think? I bet some of you have experienced sleep paralysis. I hope this doesn't trigger you. So I know that you come here to relax. But yeah, it's all kind of fun and creepy as well. If you do experience sleep paralysis, do you get scared of anything horror related? Are you just like, I don't want to deal because it's too scary? Or do you maybe like not find horror that scary because you endure it in your real life? Yeah, I'd love to hear your stories about it. Maybe I can tell you one more little story about a nightmare that I had. It wasn't very scary, it's not very scary to explain it. It was more just in the moment it felt scary, but then after, like years later, I had a weird experience that reminded me. I was in an elevator with some people, and the devil could read our mind, so we couldn't even think of anything negative about the devil, because he would make the elevator just shoot up or down or something, and it was just me and a group of people that were just being tormented. It was like, intrusive thoughts. It was like that. It was like, I can't even have intrusive thoughts right now, and no, you can't control that, can you? So it was terrifying. Anyway, I woke up out of it, and then I woke up again later, in the regular morning hours, and I just kind of laughed to myself. Didn't really forget about it. It just, over the years you don't think about it. And then a few years later, I was walking through the video store, and I saw a movie called Devil, by M. Night Shyamalan. And I was like, oh, gotta see what that's about. Pick it up and I read it, and it's like strangers trapped in an elevator with the devil. And I was like, what? What the hell, you know? And yeah, so it's always just been something that's stuck with me, because it was like, oh no, is that another sign? Anyway, I hope that wasn't too scary. I kind of wanted to make you laugh a little bit. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave you there, and I'm going to hopefully do one more Halloween themed video before we get to Halloween, just to get you guys excited. And it's very, what's the word? It's just me trying to get into the holiday spirit, you know? Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you very soon.